If I told you that giving up might be one of the most productive things you can do for your mental health right now? Now, before somebody clips that sentence and says, this man has officially lost it, let me explain. I'm not talking about giving up on life. I'm not talking about giving up on your future, your family, your faith, or yourself. I'm talking about giving up on the performance. Giving up the exhausting responsibility of convincing everyone, including yourself, that you're okay when you're not. Giving up the belief that strength means suffering quietly. Giving up the image of bravery that looks impressive from the outside but is slowly destroying you on the inside. Because some of us have become so good at looking strong that nobody notices how exhausted we are. We show up, we handle business, we make the jokes, we help everybody else. And whenever someone else asks how we're doing, we give them that automatic answer, I'm good. Meanwhile, we're going home and falling apart in private. That isn't healing. That's pain with a good camouflage. Welcome to the Shyft Within, the podcast where we have honest conversations about mental health, identity, resilience, relationships, and the difficult internal work required to build a life that is actually worth living. I'm Matthew Gendron, and everything I talk about here comes from lived experience, lessons I've learned, mistakes I've made, and the work I'm still doing. Today, we're talking about the pattern interrupt, the moment you stop automatically repeating what helps you survive and begin choosing what might finally help you heal. Let's get into it. There is a version of strength that helps us survive, but there is also a version of strength that keeps us trapped. A lot of us were taught directly or indirectly that our value comes from what we can carry, how much pressure you can handle, how much pain you can hide, how quickly you can get back up. How many people can depend on you before you finally admit that you're running on fumes? For veterans, first responders, parents, caregivers, social workers, leaders, and anyone who has spent years taking care of other people, this performance can become part of our identity. You became the strong one. And once people see you that way, it can feel like you're no longer allowed to struggle. You think, if I fall apart, who's going to hold everyone else together? If I admit I need help, people might see me differently. If I stop moving, everything I've been avoiding might catch up with me. So you keep going. You fill your schedule. You focus on other people's problems. You tell jokes. You stay busy. You avoid quiet rooms because quiet rooms tend to ask questions that busyness allows you to ignore. And let me tell you, I know something about staying busy to avoid what's happening internally. For a long time, I believed that if I kept moving, kept producing, kept helping, and kept looking strong, eventually I would feel strong again. But looking okay and getting better are not the same thing. You can be productive and still be in pain. You can be successful and still feel lost. You can be the person everyone calls for help and still have no idea who to call when you need it. You can give excellent advice while ignoring your own. Trust me, that last one will humble you. Sometimes I can explain emotional resilience with confidence of a professor and then ignore my own warning signs like I skipped a class. Knowing better and living better are two different things. Here is what we need to understand. Many of the behaviors we criticize in ourselves began as adaptations. They had a purpose. If showing emotion led to punishment, rejection, or embarrassment, you learned to hide it. If trusting people led to betrayal, you learned to keep your distance. If asking for help resulted in disappointment, you learned how to handle everything alone. If appearing strong earned approval, respect, or safety, you learned to perform strength, even when you were falling apart. Those behaviors weren't necessarily character flaws. They were survival strategies. Your mind and body were trying to protect you with the tools they had available at the time. The problem is that an adaptation can outlive the situation that created it. The silence that once prevented conflict can eventually prevent connection. The independence that kept you moving can prevent you from receiving support. The emotional wall that once protected you from being hurt can also prevent you from being loved. The hypervigilance that kept you alive in a dangerous environment can make it nearly impossible to feel safe in your own home. I experienced that after leaving the Army. I served for 15 years, and for much of that time, my identity was connected to the mission, the uniform, the responsibility, and the people around me. In that environment, you learn to move. You learn to adjust. You learn other people are depending on you, so whatever you're experiencing gets pushed aside until there's time to deal with it. The problem is, later can turn into years. I thought I was ready to leave the Army. People close to me warned me that I wasn't, but I didn't want to hear it. I believed I would take the transition and find another mission and keep moving. And for a while, that's what I did. I found work in solar sales, and many of the skills I developed through recruiting translated well. And I could talk to people, build relationships, lead, and perform under pressure. For about a year, it felt like I had found my place. But eventually, the toxicity of that environment became clear. The teamwork I had been accustomed to wasn't there. Everyone was trying to survive individually, and when I lost that job, I was forced to face something I had been avoiding. I wasn't just rebuilding a career, I was rebuilding an identity. I had spent so much time moving forward that I hadn't stopped long enough to ask who I was without the uniform, the mission, the rank, or the next objective. I was running from PTSD. I was carrying experiences from combat. I was trying to understand civilian life. And I was attempting to do all that while maintaining the image that I had everything under control. That performance wasn't healing me, it was exhausting me. A pattern interrupt is the moment you pause before automatically repeating an old response. It creates space between what you feel and what you do next. That space might only last a few seconds, but it gives you an opportunity to make a different decision. Without that pause, we often live on autopilot. Something hurts us, so we shut down. We feel overwhelmed, so we isolate. Someone asks how we're doing, so we say, I'm fine. We feel shame, so we become defensive. We feel rejected, so we push people away before they get the opportunity to leave. We become exhausted, so we work harder because productivity temporarily distracts us from the pain. The same trigger creates the same response, and the same response produces the same outcome. Then we wonder why nothing changes. A pattern interrupt doesn't mean that the original feeling disappears. It means that the feeling no longer gets to make every decision for you. Instead of immediately reacting, you learn to pause and ask, what am I expecting right now? What am I experiencing right now? What story am I telling myself about this? Is my response based on what is happening or what happened to me before? What do I actually need? What would a healthier response look like? That is where the shift begins. Not in a motivational speech, not in pretending that everything is positive, not in waking up at 4 in the morning, taking the ice bath, and shouting affirmations into the mirror. If that works for you, great. But some of us need coffee before we can even make eye contact with ourselves. The real shift begins with awareness. You cannot interrupt a pattern you refuse to acknowledge. Let's start with one of the most common patterns. I'm fine. Sometimes we say it because we don't trust the person asking. That can be appropriate. Not everyone deserves access to our most vulnerable experiences. Sometimes we say it because we don't know how to explain what we're feeling. Sometimes the truth feels too complicated. But sometimes we say it because admitting the truth would force us to do something about it. If I admit that I'm struggling, I may need to rest. If I admit that I'm overwhelmed, I may need to establish a boundary. If I admit that my mental health is declining, I may need to call someone, return to therapy, speak to a doctor, or ask for support. I'm fine allows us to delay those decisions. But pain doesn't become less real because you learn how to hide it well. Try replacing I'm fine with something more honest. I'm having a difficult day. I don't know exactly what I need, but I don't want to be alone. I'm overwhelmed. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. I've been isolating, and I know that isn't helping. I'm not in immediate danger, but I'm not doing well. That kind of honesty can feel uncomfortable, especially when you spent years protecting the image of strength. But discomfort is not the same as danger. Sometimes discomfort is simply what honesty feels like when you're no longer accustomed to it. Another pattern many of us need to interrupt is isolation. I understand the appeal of being alone. When you're alone, nobody can disappoint you. Nobody asks questions you don't want to answer. You don't have to explain your mood. You don't have to manage anyone else's expectations. For a while, isolation can feel like peace. But isolation and solitude are not the same thing. Solitude is intentional. It allows you to rest, reflect, pray, think, and reset. Isolation is often driven by pain, shame, fear, or the belief that you have become a burden. Solitude reconnects you with yourself. Isolation slowly disconnects you from everyone. The pattern interrupt might sound like this. I need some space, but I don't want to disappear. I'm overwhelmed, so I may be quieter than usual. Please check on me tomorrow. I don't feel like talking about everything, but I could use some company. You don't have to tell your entire story to interrupt isolation. Sometimes the first step is simply allowing another human being to sit beside you while you're still trying to figure out what to say. Some of us wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. We believe being needed makes us valuable. We say yes to everything. We continue giving when we have nothing left. Then we become frustrated because nobody recognizes how much we're carrying. But here's the difficult question. Have you actually told anyone that is too much? Or have you trained everyone around you to believe that you can handle everything? Personal responsibility matters here. Other people cannot respect boundaries we never communicate. They cannot respond to needs we refuse to express. And they cannot know the truth when all we show them is the performance. Rest is not something you have to earn by completely destroying yourself first. You do not need to reach a crisis before you deserve support. You do not need a complete breakdown to prove that the pressure was real. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can say is, I cannot continue carrying this in the same way. That's not quitting, that's recognizing that the current pattern is unsustainable. Another thing we may need to give up is the relentless pursuit of who we used to be. After trauma, loss, divorce, military transition, illness, career changes, or any major disruption, we often say, I just want to feel like my old self again. And I understand that. We miss the version of ourselves who seemed more confident, energetic, trusting, or certain. But healing doesn't always mean returning to who you were before the pain. Sometimes you can't go back, and maybe you're not supposed to. That doesn't mean that the pain was good or that everything happens for some simple, convenient reason. It means you're allowed to build forward. The goal isn't to erase what happened. The goal is to integrate it without allowing it to control every part of your future. I'm still rebuilding. I'm still learning what purpose looks like outside the rules that once defined me. I still have difficult days. I still recognize patterns in myself that need to be interrupted. But I'm no longer interested in pretending that healing means becoming untouched by what happened. Healing means becoming honest about what happened, understand what it changed, and taking responsibility for what I do next. Your wounds may explain some of your behaviors. They do not have to dictate your future behavior. That's the balance between compassion and accountability. We don't shame ourselves for how we survived, but we don't use survival as an excuse to continue hurting ourselves or the people around us. I want to give you something practical to use this week. When you notice yourself returning to an unhealthy pattern, walk through these 5 steps. Step 1, name the trigger. What happened immediately before the reaction? Was it criticism, rejection, conflict, feeling ignored, a memory, a tone of voice, a stressful day? Naming the trigger helps separate the current event from the emotional reaction. Step 2, name the automatic response. What do you normally do next? Do you shut down, become angry, leave, isolate, overwork, drink, spend money, look for validation, pretend nothing happened? Be honest, you cannot change a response you keep defending. Step 3, identify what the response once protected. Ask yourself, when did this response become useful? Maybe silence protected you from conflict. Maybe anger protected you from appearing vulnerable. Maybe isolation protected you from rejection. Understanding the pattern's origin allows you to approach yourself with compassion. Step 4, ask whether it still serves you. Is this behavior helping you build the life and relationships you want now? Or is it creating the very outcome you're afraid of? For example, you may isolate because you fear abandonment, but repeated isolation can push supportive people away. You may become defensive because you fear shame, but defensiveness can prevent accountability and repair. You may overwork because you fear feeling worthless, but exhaustion eventually damages your health and relationships. Step 5, choose one different response. The replacement doesn't have to be dramatic. Send the text, make the appointment, take the break, tell the truth, apologize without defending yourself, ask someone to sit with you, say no, say, I need time to calm down, but I will come back and continue this conversation. Small repeated interruptions become new patterns. That is how change happens, not all at once, one honest decision at a time. For those of us who have faith, we also need to address the belief that struggling emotionally means we aren't trusting God enough. Faith does not require emotional dishonesty. You can trust God and still be exhausted. You can pray and still need therapy. You can believe healing is possible and still take medication under the care of a qualified professional. You can have hope and still admit that today is difficult. Even Jesus expressed sorrow. He asked people close to him to remain nearby during one of his most painful moments. He didn't pretend the wait wasn't real. So maybe your act of faith today is not forcing yourself to feel better. Maybe it's telling the truth. Maybe the prayer is, God, I'm tired. I don't know what to do next. I've been pretending because I'm afraid of what happens if I stop. Help me take the next honest step. You do not need impressive words. Honesty is enough. Here's the challenge I want to leave you with. What part of the performance are you ready to give up? Are you ready to give up saying I'm fine? Are you ready to give up calling isolation strength? Are you ready to stop treating exhaustion like evidence of your worth? Are you ready to give up chasing the person you were before the pain? And are you ready to stop waiting for a complete breakdown before you ask for support? Don't give up on yourself. Give up the performance, give up the silence, give up the belief that your pain must be hidden before you're worthy of love, respect, and belonging. You do not have to look okay to begin getting better. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is in pushing through. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop, tell the truth, and interrupt the pattern that has been slowly destroying you. That is where recovery begins. Not with all the answers, with one honest decision, one phone call, one conversation, one boundary, one appointment, one moment when the old pattern says, hide, and you decide to be seen. The pattern breaks when the truth begins. So thank you for spending this time with me on the Shyft Within. If this episode connected with you, share it with someone who has been carrying more than they want to admit. You never know when giving someone permission to stop performing might help them take their first honest step towards recovery. And take a moment to ask yourself, what am I tired of pretending doesn't hurt? You don't have to answer publicly, but answer honestly. Until next time, remember, the greatest changes in our lives often begin with the shift nobody else can see, the shift within. If you're considering suicide, believe you may hurt yourself, or feel that you cannot remain safe, call or text 988 in the United States to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're somewhere else, contact your local crisis service or emergency number. You do not have to face another moment alone.